Dirty Birds, what's up? And welcome to another edition of Falcons Final Whistle presented by Zaxby's. I'm your host, Will McFadden. I'm joined by Tori McElhaney and Terrin Waack. And Tori, this week's game feels important for so many different reasons for the Atlanta Falcons. They're taking on the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, and the Minnesota Vikings are rolling right now. They are very, very good in one-score games. You have it right here. They're 7-1 in one-score games. This is not a team that I think is playing to the level that I expected them to. I think they've exceeded my expectations of what I thought the Minnesota Vikings were going to be in 2024, especially without Kirk at quarterback. And so because of that, they kind of have surprised me. And then you look at where the Falcons are, they're coming off of Kirk's coming off of his worst performance potentially of his entire career, according to what stats you look at. And the Falcons are on a 3-game skid that I think when you look at the last 3 games, the Saints, the Broncos, and the Chargers, on paper, those were all winnable games.
Yep.
And if the Falcons show up in the same way that they did in October, in November, we're having a completely different conversation. But as I wrote this week, in the quest to outrun the South is catching up, and Tampa Bay is right in lockstep with where the Falcons are right now.
No, for sure. I think the playoff picture is what my eye is on the most, because for the longest time it was like, oh, the Falcons are undefeated in the division. They're undefeated in the division. It's like, well, now they're not. And they're also amid this losing skid where it's like the time to catch up has finished. Like the Buccaneers are right there on the Falcons' talon, whatever the bird actually has back there.
Tail feather.
There you go.
And you can't let them take a lead. Like, you only have a half-game lead. You have the tiebreaker.
Yeah.
You can't let them sneak ahead.
Well,
you
here's
need
the
to stay
thing.
ahead.
They are playing. It's important to talk about who they're playing this weekend. They're playing the Raiders this weekend coming up.
Tampa Bay.
Yes, is playing the Raiders this weekend. The Falcons are playing the Vikings. If this thing goes that I think a lot of people are expecting it to go, where the Bucs beat the Raiders, the Falcons lose to the Vikings, Tampa Bay takes the lead.
Yeah.
Now, in the grand scheme of things, that's not the end of the world.
Falcons get the Raiders next week.
The Falcons get the Raiders next week. The Saints still have, or the Bucs still have the Saints and the Panthers coming up in the last half of the season, or the final 2 games of the season. There's a lot that's going to shake out, and this is another season where we're sitting here talking about this thing going all the way potentially to the very, very end of the season. Because in the grand scheme of things, for the Falcons to be sitting atop the NFC South in Week 18, they have to do as much as what the Bucs do.
Yeah.
They hold the tiebreaker over the Bucs, so in theory, they can have the same amount of wins as the Bucs and still be atop the NFC South because of what they did in October, which that month is going to pay dividends, carry them into a hypothetical postseason if they can get there. But they're not going to get there if they keep losing games.
Right.
So all of this that we're saying, all of this that we're talking about could be for naught if the Falcons of November continue into December.
They've been in the driver's seat for so long that you don't want to turn into a passenger princess.
I love it.
No, yeah, that's really well said. And it is
The passenger princess was really well said.
a passenger princess. Hey, I am a sucker for alliteration, right? You could literally say anything as long as it starts with the same letter. I'm going to give you a
You're
gold
like,
star.
that's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
exactly.
Yeah.
I'm like the world's easiest editor. You just write whatever. No, it's the smallest of margins, right? And that is where they did such great work early in the season, but to really fulfill the promise of the 2024 campaign, they've got to start playing better football. And honestly, that starts at the quarterback position, right? You mentioned Kirk coming off of one of his worst performances. He's in the midst of arguably the worst stretch of his career, hasn't thrown a touchdown pass in those last 3 games. And he's going up against not only a defense that is one of the very best in the NFL, but entering an environment that he knows very well, but knows him very well. And I think it is going to be at fever pitch on Sunday when Kirk Cousins steps back into US Bank Stadium. So, really quickly, I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts, Tori, because of not only the importance of kind of this matchup and Minnesota playing really, really well and them themselves being a really good team at 10-2, but the Kirk factor of it all. Where has your attention kind of been this week? Have you been looking more at Atlanta and Kirk Cousins and kind of their mindset going into this one, or have you been looking at the opponent and what the obstacle will be on Sunday?
I think it's hard for me to choose one or the other because I think they both play off of each other. But if I had to choose, I do think that a lot of what I have personally written about this week has to do with Kirk. And I think that I was critical in my column after the game in saying that the Falcons need more from Kirk Cousins if they hope to be a playoff contender, if they hope to even make it to the postseason, just point blank period. And what they've gotten from not just him, but I'll say the offense as a whole in the last 3 games is not enough, and it's not going to be enough. And whereas we were looking at the last 5 games of the season, and you're like, okay, the Vikings, Commanders, they are who they are, but you also have the Raiders and the Giants and the Panthers. Those other 3 games are not looking as easy right now because of the lack of consistency that this offense has been playing with in the last 3 times out. So a lot of that does go back to Kirk and the production or lack thereof of which he has been playing with or not playing with. And something that I try often to not be like, not to kick someone when they're down. But sometimes you need a little kick in the keister in order to get where you need to go. And I think back to Kirk's presser on Wednesday. And I knew going into that presser, like thinking about what he could say, what he should say, that it doesn't matter what he says, everyone's going to be mad.
Yeah.
Everyone's mad. The Falcons put themselves in the position of they drafted a quarterback with the number 8 overall pick and then gave Kirk Cousins the contract that they did. Of course, we knew this when Michael Penix was drafted, that as soon as Kirk Cousins has a bad stretch of games, people are going to be calling for Michael Penix.
Yep.
That's the situation that the Falcons put themselves in. But another fact of the matter is that in the span of his 13-year career, Kirk Cousins has bounced back. He has been this very like hot and cold player. Someone who, one of my friends in the league texted me the other day, and they're like, Kirk Cousins is simultaneously one of the best players that I've ever seen, and then he has these moments like what we saw this past Sunday where it's just like not clicking.
It's the difference to me between when we talk about like an elite quarterback, right, and the great quarterbacks and the good quarterbacks. It's the level of consistency.
Yeah.
The elite quarterbacks, week in and week out, bring it every single time, whether the team around them plays well or not. The great quarterbacks maybe have a couple of games a year where they dip below their usual standard of play. The good, you can take it from there. It's just kind of the frequency. And to me, Kirk has always been, even before he came here to Atlanta, we would have debates in the press box and just kind of talk about it as everybody around the league did, because he was kind of the poster boy for, I think, straddling that line between great and elite, and at times like very good and great. And that's kind of, I think, where he is right now, is he's like going through that portion of the season where, to your point, he does sometimes take a little bit of a step back. But before, he has risen to the occasion. He has bounced back. He has kind of throughout his career been defined by overcoming the odds a little bit.
No, and that's exactly what I wrote about today. We're recording this on Thursday, and I had a story that ran this morning about just kind of all those different points in time in his career where something happened, whether it be an injury, whether it be getting benched, whether it be losing games, throwing interceptions, and then he comes back on a high. And he does have this moment of redemption. If there ever was a moment for not just the Falcons to have redemption, but Kirk Cousins to have redemption within himself, it's in the context and story of this game in Minnesota, for all of the reasons that we just said of where this team is coming into this game, but also where Kirk Cousins is coming into this game and coming back to Minnesota.
No, I completely agree. I was actually came running from practice for this podcast and was talking to another reporter at practice about how I think this may be possibly the most important game of Kirk's career. Like, I'm sure there are ones that, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, like, this is your 3rd team. You're getting older. And you're in this really rough stretch, and the pressure's on. Like, people have been questioning you since you arrived in Atlanta, whether it's the injury, whether they should have done this, whether they should have drafted a quarterback. There have been so many questions surrounding the decision to bring Kirk Cousins to Atlanta. And now that he's in a rough patch, I do think, like, those are resurfacing. Like you said, people are bringing up Penix for the first time since they drafted him. And to return home to a place where maybe he didn't leave on the best of terms.
I'm really curious to see what the reception is for him on Sunday, because 6 seasons, 3 Pro Bowls, 2 playoff trips, a very memorable win against the Saints. Let's go. But You guys just no-sold the rivalry there.
I'm so sorry.
Let's go. But
my capital J journalism is coming out where I'm like, I cannot cheer for anything ever.
I need you to be a capital P podcaster
Capital
and a capital
P
E entertainer.
This fan's flag is deflated.
But I mean, to your point, like, what terms did he leave on, and what does the fan base in Minnesota feel towards him?
So I'm not from Minnesota, so I don't know. But
you don't say.
I don't know. It's just like, it's all these things coming together in this big moment where the division has caught up. Like, he has this, as you keep saying, the worst game of his career last week, possibly. Like, it rivals it. I think this game rivals what could be the most important. It's following possibly his worst, and it could be possibly his most important, because I think all of these reasons to get highlighted, bolded, underlined if this is a loss. So, like, it's just going to get louder.
Yeah. No, it will. I mean, for sure. So really quickly, I kind of want to maybe like a minute each. Do we expect a good game from Kirk? What kind of performance do we think we're going to get on Sunday? Tori?
I don't know, because
that's the right answer. By the way,
I think that he said all the right things. I think the Falcons have said all the right things, but words mean little if you can't back it up with action. And it's one of those things that I won't believe it until I see it. And I feel like the trends don't bode well. And that's the thing, is like, if we're taking kind of the like storylines out of it, if we're just looking at this from a pure analytical standpoint,
black and white, yep.
The trends don't look good for this offense at this current juncture. If this game is happening off the tail end of the Dallas win, where even though like it wasn't the best collective performance from first quarter to fourth quarter, but they did what they needed to do to get the win, perhaps I feel very differently. But they're coming off of 3 games, one of which you did not score an offensive touchdown. The second time this year that you have not scored an offensive touchdown. I think it's like
First time they lost.
It's a bigger deal than I think just Kirk.
Yes.
And I think that's another thing that was very obvious to me when Zach Robinson, Raheem Morris, like receivers, people were talking, as they kept kind of, and they could just be saying this to get everybody's back or get off of Kirk's back, as good coaches do. But there is this part of me that's like, they're sitting there saying like, we as an offense need to be better. Before last week, we as a defense need to be more consistent. And it's like all of these things that asking the question of, what's repeatable about this team and the way that they perform? Is pass rush repeatable from last week, to talk about the defense? Is the Kirktober of Kirk Cousins repeatable 3 games after a skid? Like, all these are big questions that you're asking about who this team is and what they're going to do. It's not just, in my mind, Kirk's a major storyline. But if you're just looking at it from a statistical, analytical point of view, it's everything.
Oh, absolutely. But Terrin, how do you think Kirk's going to play on Sunday?
Holy plot twist. You're going with the stats, and I'm going to go with the sentiments.
I know.
The tables have turned, the turns have tabled.
The tables have turned.
This was our question of the week for the.com. And
yes.
kind of like, if you were Kirk, how would you feel? Oh, I'm eager. I'm chomping at the bit to get on that field and show your former team, like, look what you lost. It's kind of like, instead of a revenge bod, you have a revenge game. Like, I don't know. Yeah. That's me. And like, you have the comfort of knowing the environment you're going into. Yeah. I haven't been to this stadium, but I've heard epic things about it. And so you know what you're walking into. Let that fuel you. Like, this should be comfortable. Like, you don't know the visitors' locker room, whatever. You don't know that any week most of the time. And so this time, though, when you step on that field, let those old feelings of familiarity and comfortability relax you instead of make you more and more anxious. That's how I look at it, because I think of, like, when I return somewhere I used to live, it's not ever like a pressure. I don't know.
Or like apprehension.
Yeah, it's more of like a
Yeah, you kind of slide right back into that mindset, right?
And so if Kirk can slide back into this idea or this mode where he is productive and throwing touchdowns and whatnot, do it. Like, I don't know. No. Mine's a sentimental thing, and that might just be me. Maybe someone else would have, like, anxieties returning home kind of thing. But I will pull a stat out, too. He's only ever had 2 games in U.S. Bank Stadium in which he never threw a touchdown. What better place to break this 3-game streak than somewhere he was dominant? And that's in 44 games. So 95% of the time. Add to that.
Yeah. I'll also say that the Falcons don't win this game unless Kirk Cousins performs. And
no pressure.
I think that the facts and the stats back it up. I know I tweeted this the other day just about the fact that where Kirk Cousins goes, this team has gone in 2024. And if he has a sub 90 passer rating, they're 1-6. If he has over a 90 passer rating, they're 5-0.
Do you know what that one was? In the 1-6?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
I was just curious.
If I could venture a guess is like New Orleans, the first New Orleans game.
The first one?
Yeah, where they, again, didn't score an
Didn't
offensive
score,
touchdown.
right, yeah. But we're moving the ball. Yeah.
No, I both of those points are great. Terrin, the visuals, I totally agree. That's kind of what
picture.
I wrote in my answer to the question of the week, which was, is this a good time for the Vikings game, right, for Kirk Cousins? And I think that there is something to returning to a very familiar place that you can have these good muscle memory, kind of like reflexive visualizations with. And he has done some amazing things inside of that building. So I think getting him touches early, like getting a few passes completed early on in the game, kind of get him into the flow of everything. But bottom line is he has to perform in this game because the Falcons need him to, right? Like it has to be a good time for him to go back to Minnesota because the Falcons need it to be a good time. Their backs are against the wall. His back is against the wall. So now it's time to do what he's always done throughout his career and respond. So now we just got to see if he does that. But to your point, Tori, he will not be doing this alone, right? The Falcons need him, but he also needs to rely on the guys around him against a team that is one of the very best in the NFC, if not the NFL. So let's go ahead and kind of start by talking about another premier matchup, and that's going to be A.J. Terrell versus Justin Jefferson. I think that if you look at Justin Jefferson, he's second in the league in receiving yards right now. Even though it doesn't feel like he's having a traditional Justin Jefferson type of season, A.J. Terrell, I think, is re-established himself as one of the top corners in the league. Teams aren't throwing at him a ton. He is, given up a few catches here and there, but he's been really good at limiting yards after the catch. He's got a couple of picks so far this season. So when you look at A.J. Terrell versus Justin Jefferson, kind of who do you think has an edge there? And is this maybe the most exciting non-quarterback involved matchup of the game?
No, I absolutely think it's the marquee matchup of the game because I do believe that here's the thing. We also have to put into context what's going to happen opposite A.J. Terrell.
Yep.
Mike Hughes has had a neck injury that they've been very conservative with. You don't mess with that.
Right.
So he was a full participant in Wednesday's practice. So if they're able to get him back, does he return to the starting lineup? If it's not him, is it Clark Phillips? Like, what's happening opposite of A.J.? But then there's also the exact same conversation where it's like, if you're Jerry Gray and Jimmy Lake, it's just like, A.J. just follow Justin Jefferson everywhere across the field at all times.
And he goes everywhere.
Everywhere.
Left, right, slot, wide, like tight. He's everywhere.
Right. And I also think that it'll be very important, the role of Justin Simmons, of Jesse Bates, D. Alford. But the thing is you can't overlook, too, what Jordan Addison's doing.
Yep.
Either.
Or T.J. Hawkinson, or they've got good weapons everywhere.
That's the thing is we can talk about A.J. Terrell and Justin Jefferson all day long, and each guy's probably going to get his moment. And I hate that this has become the theme of the podcast where I'm just like, but what about everybody else? But that's kind of where my head's at, because if you do put all your eggs in the Justin Jefferson basket and you do have some shading happening, it worries me about what can happen elsewhere. But in the grand scheme of things, this is the premier matchup for me. And I think if you're a football fan, you're excited to see these two guys go at each other a little bit.
Terrin,
I completely agree. I talked to Justin Simmons in the locker room Wednesday a bit about it, just kind of all right, got to ask about Justin Jefferson. Everyone's got his name highlighted when it comes to the passing game in general for the Vikings. And his thing was get 4 eyes on him. Make sure more than one person has their eyes on Justin Jefferson at all times, because you do have to shut him down. But the key to also doing that is making sure that they stop the run up front to begin with.
And putting pressure on Sam Darnold.
Absolutely.
Repeating that pass rush.
Yep.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about that aspect of this matchup, the Falcons pass rush against the Vikings pass protection. There are a lot of elements of this Vikings team that are great, but the pass protection hasn't necessarily been one of them. And so if there is an area where Atlanta, coming off of a 5-sack performance, their best of the season, can maybe make an impact, it could be with their pass rush. If you look at, the Vikings have given up 37 sacks so far this season, 9th most in the league. They have the 4th highest pressure rate allowed. And recently acquired left tackle Cam Robinson has allowed the 2nd highest pressure rate in the league since he joined the Vikings, 18.4%. So Arnold McElhaney,
I know.
Lorenzo Carter,
I was
Matthew
just
Judon.
circling that,
Yep.
figuring out whatever you have to do to take advantage of that kind of weak link right there. And not to say that.
Weak link.
Well, I mean, if you think about a chain gain in offensive line, like that's what it is. And so,
An Alabama grad though.
sorry, but I do.
Plenty of weak links in Alabama this year. So
I do think
Unnecessary.
I do think, to get us back on topic, I do think that this could be another game that you could see Arnold McElhaney really get going a little bit. I thought I was very, very impressed by, especially going back and watching. I felt like in the moment against the Chargers that I could feel Arnold McElhaney's presence.
Yeah.
And, but in the moment you're watching so many other things. You have different storylines in your head. Whereas going back and watching the All-22 a day later, seeing what he was able to do and how explosive he looked and how much I felt like he was kind of playing with a physicality that we've been missing in the pass rush
and
a little bit.
Isn't really part of his game, or at least I wouldn't off the top of my head if I was listing the top 3 things that I think of when I think of Arnold McElhaney. It's not necessarily a bull rush. It's not like a straw. It's not that power element to his game. So, yeah, I mean, I think Matthew Judon has brought that, but to see that on the other side from AK has been awesome.
Yeah, and it's kind of a new development to your point. And I think that if you're Arnold McElhaney and you're Jimmy Lake and you're Jerry Gray and kind of you're looking at the fact of the matter of Cam Robinson and what he's kind of given up this year and how you can exploit it, I think you're sitting there with guys like Arnold McElhaney and Matthew Judon licking their lips a little bit.
Caden Ellis, maybe?
Caden Ellis. Do some fun things with Caden Ellis, especially if you can get more of Troy Anderson out there who can kind of help in dropping into coverage, talking about what some of these receivers' weapons can do for the Vikings. That's going to be kind of the chess, not checkers type of thing, is what do you do with Troy Anderson and how do you help him help the secondary versus help him help Caden Ellis. So that's a intriguing part of this matchup as well that I don't think anybody's talking about.
You optimistic about the pass rush, Terrin?
We know I don't use the word optimist or pessimist. Just neutral. It's kind of how Tori said earlier when it came to Kirk Cousins. I don't know how he's going to perform. I don't know how the pass rush is going to do because we haven't seen it do or perform at that level on a consistent basis. Because I think back to Dallas when they had 3 sacks and it was can they do it again in the next week? And then they did not. And so now it's they had 5. Can they do it again this week? TBD.
Yeah, even if it's short of 5, right? If
it
you
doesn't
can
have to be 5.
If you can get 3 really impactful, timely sacks, I think that could be the difference in this game because we went into that Chargers game kind of talking in a similar fashion. Kirk stuff aside, that wasn't a part of it, but the Chargers were a really good team with a great defense, with a quarterback who's playing well and some dynamic offensive weapon. And the Falcons were the better team on the field on Sunday in that game. So I'm not discounting this group's ability to prepare for this specific opponent, come up with a game plan that is effective, and I think the pass rush will be a part of that game plan and have an impact on Sunday. But you could flip it around and say the exact same thing about Minnesota's pass rush.
Correct.
They are an attacking defense. They love to blitz. They are the number 1 team in the league in zone blitz rate. They have one player, Jonathan Grenard, with 10 sacks. They have Andrew Van Ginkel, who has 9 sacks. They create turnovers. Byron Murphy has 5 interceptions. So, Terrin, when you kind of look at what Kirk Cousins and Atlanta's offensive line is going to be up against in against Minnesota's defense, what kind of performance do you think Atlanta's offense will be able to muster against a group that is, again, one of the best in the league?
I think it just feeds into the narrative where it's now they're going to be pushing and wanting to get to Kirk so much that it's just putting more and more pressure on him, and then even more so on the offensive line to have the success as a group, because it's a whole team effort that Kirk can't have the success if he's on the ground.
Yeah.
Or if he's
no weak links.
Being completely pressured and whatnot and getting rattled back there. And so I think it starts up front and how they're able to hold off the Vikings defense so Kirk can operate with time and no pressure.
Yeah, and the other part of that, to your point of it starts up front, which I know we say that all the time and it can kind of be a cliche, but when you look at this Minnesota defense, it does matter, because not only are they doing some good things with their blitz packages and getting after the quarterback, they're also one of the best, if not the best, run defenses.
Yes, they are number one.
They are number one. And when you're thinking about the way that Bijan Robinson is used in this offense, Bijan Robinson, especially in the last few games, has been the go-to guy. Well, I think it was, I can't remember if this was you or somebody who you went back and you looked at kind of the first drives of the Falcons over the last 5 games and how much they're giving the ball to Bijan to start the series. And that opening drive, that opening series is scripted. That's your one script. You have scripted plays for your 2-minute and everything like that, but that's the one drive that you're like, this is, everybody knows what we're doing.
Yeah, it's the plays everybody should feel best about, right? The quarterback feels good about, the offensive line, the running back. Everybody has worked on that throughout the week. You feel like it'll either expose something in the defensive game plan that you can exploit later, or you're outright attacking something you've identified on film that you think, hey, this is a good matchup for us. Let's go to it early and let's just go ahead and start exploiting it.
And they use Bijan Robinson as the measuring stick for that. And what they can get away with using him because of his versatility and because of the athletic talent that he is and his vision for the holes and being able to make something happen maybe sometimes when something isn't there. They use him as the benchmark. What can we do with Bijan Robinson very early on? What can we exploit very early on? And how does that open things up for us later in the game? So that piece of it, if we're talking about just the Vikings defense overall and what they've been able to do, stopping the run, and kind of understanding how much the Falcons rely upon Bijan Robinson very, very early, that gives me pause. And it's a part of the game that I think is going to matter the most very early on.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to phrase it. Is this going to be kind of like an early measuring stick matchup? Because it is good on good, Terrin.
Yeah, I think the way that we're circling Justin Jefferson is the way they're circling Bijan Robinson. Because in 6 of the last 7 games, he's had at least 100 yards from scrimmage. So obviously he's getting the ball, whether he's running it or being incorporated into the pass game and being productive whenever he does touch the ball. Yeah,
and when you look at some of the, just the statistics for Minnesota's run defense and Bijan are fascinating, and they will be really an early bellwether, I think, for whether Atlanta is going to be able to kind of do what they did against Los Angeles and stick it to them and play their style of football, or whether Minnesota at home is going to really be able to kind of put Atlanta in a tough spot early. But it's really outside of the runs or outside of the tackles, that's the part of the run game that Atlanta has been really effective with, which makes sense because Bijan is just so good at making people miss. He's forced 44 missed tackles on outside runs, which is the 3rd most among running backs, but the Vikings have the 2nd fewest missed tackles on outside runs. So it's like an unstoppable object against an immovable force,
no,
right?
That's the thing. It's the absolute definition of good versus good.
Yeah, because Bijan can make anybody miss.
Right. Yeah, but the Vikings don't miss.
Yeah,
I love it. I think that's going to be the most fun. Talking about playing chess, not checkers. This is a good also test for someone like Zach Robinson, and I think that it'll be if
Charlie Warner, Drake London, the
I think
blockers.
that when we look back at this game, this could be a big moment for the way that we think about Zach Robinson as a play caller.
Yeah, I really agree as well. What are the spots he's able to put his guys in?
Yeah.
And is he able to kind of get the Vikings guessing, not knowing what's coming, keeping them off balance, and mixing in the different elements of this offense effectively? Yeah, that is what an offensive coordinator needs to do to put his team in the best situation when you're going up against one of the best groups in the league and a very, very good defensive coordinator on the other side as well. So let's go ahead. We're going to go back to the game at the very end of this podcast, but we're going to take a brief detour to do something that maybe only I care about because this is a passion point of mine. Duluth, Georgia versus Duluth, Minnesota. All right? We've got our own little Duluth rivalry happening right now. I am sick and tired as a Duluthian here in Georgia.
Duluthian?
A Duluthian.
Is that what y'all
yeah.
call each other?
Hop on board. We got hats. I'll send you one. Anytime I go to Google and I start typing in Duluth, it's just Duluth, Minnesota, right? So
Did you look up populations?
Oh, I've got a lot of stuff for you. I'm going to throw some stuff at you, Terrin. Don't worry.
Okay.
But I want if somebody knows anybody who lives in Duluth, Minnesota, I want you to just send them this and let them know that we have officially started a rivalry with Duluth, Minnesota, okay? So this is
Calm
bigger.
down on the we. I don't
this
think
is
Tori
bigger
and I
than
are
some
involved in
football game on Sunday. This is now the Duluth Bowl. I love that. All right, so what we're gonna do is I've got some trivia for the two of you.
Oh my gosh.
I'm gonna.
Are we supposed to know the answers?
No, you're not.
Cool.
You're supposed to. I'm gonna give you the fact.
Okay.
And then you're gonna tell me whether you think this is Duluth, Minnesota, or Duluth, Georgia.
Okay.
All right. So, how do we want to do this? You want me to alternate or just?
I think you got this.
Somebody threw
You're
some.
steering this ship.
No, he's asking if we want to answer together or if we want to answer separately.
Yes.
Right. And I'm just saying, whatever you want.
What do you want to do, Tori?
I kind of like the idea of competition. I want to do like T versus T.
Whoever throws it out first.
Yeah.
Okay. Which Duluth has a population of 86,697 people?
Minnesota.
Correct.
Damn.
It's a lot.
Oh, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss on this podcast.
Darn.
Darn it.
Which Duluth has a record high temperature of 106 degrees?
Georgia.
Incorrect. Minnesota. Gotcha. Which Duluth is the hometown of Raven-Symoné?
Georgia?
Correct.
Yeah. I don't
Correct. Duluth, Georgia. Raven-Symoné's
That's so Raven.
own. I know, right?
I didn't know Raven was from there.
Which Duluth was featured in the novel The Great Gatsby?
Minnesota?
Minnesota. Correct. Which Duluth elected its state's first female mayor in 1922?
Minnesota.
Georgia.
Whoa.
Let's go, Georgia. Let's go, Duluth.
I'm shocked.
How about that for representation?
I am shocked.
Yeah.
Which Duluth has a minor league hockey team named the Gladiators?
Georgia.
Correct. That was the
Go
easiest one.
Gladiators. Woo.
Go Gladiators.
Go hockey.
Gas South Arena, baby. Which Duluth was the place where pie a la mode was invented, which is a slice of pie with ice cream on top?
I feel like Minnesota.
It is Minnesota.
Okay. I thought that was going to be a trick question.
Yeah.
Like
Also the invention of the pizza roll
Ooh.
in Minnesota.
Wow.
Like the ones that Tostinos?
I mean, the brand, no, but just like I guess the actual
the
food.
patent.
Yeah.
of it.
The concept of a pizza roll. Whoever took a pizza and just rolled it up.
It's my favorite.
Really?
Yeah.
Pizza rolls?
Oh, I will devour some pizza rolls.
That's amazing. You probably have the best looking freezer in this entire state.
It's empty.
Which Duluth fielded an NFL team nicknamed the Kellys from 1923 to 1925?
I'm going to go with Minnesota.
Correct. And then they were later named the Eskimos. Fun fact.
Interesting.
All right, we've got one more. Which Duluth hosted a PGA Tour tournament from 1997 to 2008?
I'm going to say
Georgia.
Georgia.
Correct.
Yeah.
You guys are good. You know your Duluths.
Yeah.
Look at that.
We started off a little like slow, but we got it. We got in there.
I know Duluth, Minnesota because of the Grandma's Marathon. It's like a major running event, and I really want to do it.
Is it
They're
only
only
grandmas?
grandmas?
Do you have to be a maximum, or is there a minimum
No,
age?
I'm allowed to do it, and I'm not
Well,
a grandmother.
you're a grandma at heart.
I think that's a first that I don't even know how to react.
The look on your face. Everybody go watch YouTube and you can see the look on Terrin's face.
I think I was
was
looking
so-
too directly at you,
so
though, for them to see.
disappointed.
That was so funny.
So disappointed.
Ouch.
Oh my God.
I didn't mean it at all, Terrin. You're,
God,
you're
that's
not a
so
grand.
funny.
You're not. If anybody's a grandmother in this group, it's
It is
me.
Will.
So
It's Will
all right.
Mother.
Grandmother, darling.
All right, let's go and wrap this thing up. We'll do one thing that the Falcons need to win, need to do to win on Sunday. Tori, we'll start with you.
Kirk Cousins needs to throw a friggin' touchdown pass.
Okay.
Maybe multiple.
Yeah, I was like,
Honestly,
just one?
probably multiple. He's got to be better. If Kirk Cousins plays the way that he did against the Chargers, the Falcons will have a hard time winning any games down the stretch. And I think we saw it didn't matter how good the defense performed. If you're not scoring points, you're not winning games. So Kirk Cousins has to be better.
Terrin?
I'm going to take a little pressure off of Kirko but keep it on the offense. Score when you're in the red zone.
That's a good one.
Yes.
Correct. Yes.
Mine is also going to be kind of on the offense, but I went and looked at the first and fourth quarter numbers because I just kind of have a feeling that this game is going to really be defined by the team that can either get off to a good start or really finish strong, because both of these teams have played in a lot of one-score games, and so either the ability to separate yourself early and establish your style of play, especially for the Falcons on the road, if you can kind of quiet that crowd down, that would be really nice. So the Vikings are number 1 in points in the first quarter, 7.08 points. The Falcons are number 14, just under kind of like 4.5 there. But in the fourth quarter, Vikings are number 22, and the Falcons are last in points scored. So I need the Falcons to kind of flip that script in the fourth quarter, finish strong, and kind of withstand the Vikings, hold their offense down, maybe start with the ball, and kind of do what they did against the Chargers and really ground and pound, eat up some clock, eat up possessions.
Yeah. Great 3 answers, you guys.
Yeah.
If it gets close, the Falcons are 5-4 in one-possession games. And I know we led with saying the Vikings. I had to think about who they were playing.
7-1.
Or
Yeah.
7-1.
Yeah.
So buckle up.
Terrin, I pre-feel bad for you for the game breakdown. I just already know that this is going to
Be past my bedtime as a grandmother.
It's going to be, yeah, it will be. I'll have to wake you up. It'll be a legendary game breakdown down to the wire. So I hope
Legendary.
Calm down.
you're so scared.
Let's go with legendary and down to the wire. It'll be a above average game breakdown that'll be stress free and come out as soon as the buzzer ends.
Yes, it will come out as soon as the buzzer ends either way, because we are that good.
Above average. This is hilarious. Give yourself more credit than that. Give yourself more credit.
I did above.
All right, let's hope the Falcons play above average football on Sunday, and that they
Above
can
average, everyone.
leave Minnesota with a victory. But that will do it for our show today. Everybody, be sure to check out the pregame show, which will go live at noon on YouTube on Sunday. Taylor Vismore, Derek Rackley do a great job breaking down the game. Also, check out Falcons Audible with Rack, Arch, and Shock. They also do a great job previewing all of the action. Check out AtlantaFalcons.com.
And then us.
A lot of great content that we are producing, also covering this important matchup and just kind of the mindset of the team going into it. But that will do it for us today. Please like and subscribe, spread the word. Check out our YouTube channel. For Tori, McElhaney, and Terrin Waack, I'm Will McFadden. We will see you all next time. Today's episode of Falcons Final Whistle is brought to you by Zaxby's. And after a long game, when I'm tired and I need to refuel, I turn to Zaxby's. Their marinated, hand-breaded, fried to perfection chicken fingers, they hit the spot every time. Get yours with seasoned crinkle fries, a nice drink, and whichever of their 12 signature sauces you're feeling at the moment. But it always hits just right. So next time you need to refuel, go get yourself some Zaxby's.